So I'm Ron with OnPoint. Today we're going to go through setting up a Pixhawk flight controller, start to finish. Now it doesn't matter whether it's on a Hawk, a longbow, this aircraft here is called a short bow, a crane, or even one of our older systems, a stem box, stem dragon, stem ranger. Pixhawk's setup is virtually the same for all aircraft, and the only setting changes you have to make tend to be whether it's a hexcopter or a quadcopter, things along those lines. So we're going to hook it up, we're going to start to go through, and you'll see all of the setup steps we take to get this all set up.
Alright.
Okay. Alright, so a couple things kind of important to do. This is a 10-foot USB cable. When you're taking the aircraft and moving it around, it's kind of helpful to have something that's a little more than a couple feet long. So a 10-foot or a 6-foot cord are pretty helpful to use. And as you'll see as we go through this, we'll have to take the aircraft and move it and turn it a couple different ways. It's not too bad, but you get a larger aircraft like a hexcopter or something like that, then you're really going to want a long cable to do it with. Right? So the first thing we're going to do, unfurl our cable here. And we're going to plug it into the computer. And then we're going to plug it into the aircraft flight controller. Now, as I think I mentioned, the USB connector on the flight controller is just soldered onto a circuit board. So you don't want to press too hard because you run the possibility of breaking it right off that board. And that would ruin the flight controller. Alright. We got it powered up. You heard it go through a boot up sequence. So now we're going to open up the software we're going to use. Now we're going to use Q ground control. All right.
Manual flight mode, pre-flight.
We're going to use Q ground control. There's others. There's Mission Planner. There's a couple of others out there you can use. I like the interface with Q ground control, so that's the one we typically use. All right. When you first bring it up, you're likely to get some error messages, which are common because it knows your flight controller is not configured. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the firmware. So when you open it up, sometimes you'll have to click on a screen to get to the gear icon to get to this position. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and it's going to update the firmware. So all we have to do, go to the firmware tab. We're going to unplug the aircraft, unplug the USB, and then plug it back in. And it says exactly that on the screen. Now, when it opens back up, it's going to ask you which firmware do you want to use. Do you want to use PX4 or do you want to use ArduPilot? They both work just as well as the other. There's some flight features are a little bit different between them, but it doesn't really make a difference. You're welcome to use whichever one you want. As I mentioned, Mission Planner is a PC software for configuring these. It was actually written to be used with ArduPilot, and PX4 was written to be used with Q ground control, but they will work with either one. So we're going to use PX4 today. So we click on the little radio button for PX4, and we hit OK. So first thing it does, as you can see, it's going to go through and it's going to erase the previous version of the firmware. Completely take it off. All right? It only takes a few seconds. I'm not going to speed this up, let you kind of see what that process looks like. You see the bar goes across, and then it starts writing the new firmware to the flight controller. Again, it takes maybe 30 seconds or so for it to write that. And again, Mission Planner or Q ground control, ArduPilot or PX4, it's really up to you. If you have time or you have some experience, you may experiment with different ones, see if there's one you like better than the others. I frankly like the interface with Q ground control better than Mission Planner. Plus Q ground control will work on a Mac, a PC, an Android tablet, an iOS device. It's got a little more capabilities, and I think it's a little easier interface to use. So that's what we're using today. That's what we're demonstrating it. So when you first bring it on, you're likely to see all of these little squares here with red dots on them. That means they need to be configured. And it also gives you a warning at the top. If you turn the audio on, it'll talk to you and tell you these things as well. It gets a little bit much when we're trying to record, so we have it turned off. But it's saying that your vehicle requires setup prior to flight. So the first tab you're going to go to, and whether you select it on the left-hand side or you select the large block, doesn't matter, is Airframe. We're going to go through here, we're going to find our Airframe. Now this, as you can see, is just a quadcopter, and we go in and we find the quadcopter icon, which is right down here on the left. And it's set right in here for generic quadcopter. Now if you pull down the menu, click down, it's got many different aircraft that is firmware is written or for them. But for aircraft, we're going to use just generic quadcopter. It works just fine. Once you do that, go back up to the top and you have to click apply and restart. A common thing we do with the Pixhawk's flight controller in this process is you have to you institute a change, you calibrate something, it will tell you you have to reboot the flight controller. Alright, so that's a common thing you'll have to do. So we're going to hit apply and restart. It brings out another box, we tell it to apply, and it went through a reboot sequence. So it automatically is rebooting now. So once it goes through the reboot cycle, you hear the tones that the flight controller makes, and it takes you right back to the screen where you were. Alright? You can get a lot of warnings. They'll show up in this yellow banner here from time to time. I wouldn't worry about those while you're doing setup. That's fairly common. But as we go through, once you have it fully configured, then if you have warnings, you're going to have to pay attention to them. Alright?